Shadows of control Zoe Palmer stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. 3 missed calls from Dominic. She knew what would follow: accusatory texts, thinly veiled threats disguised as concern, and eventually begrudging apologies that never acknowledged the real problem. The design studio was quiet this late in the evening. As a freelance illustrator, Zoe often stayed after hours, finding peace in the emptiness. Her latest project, branding for a women's shelter, felt personally significant in ways she wasn't ready to admit. "Still here? Didn't you have that dinner thing with what's-his-name?" Talia, her colleague and closest friend, leaned against the doorframe. "Dominic canceled." Zoe set her phone face down. "Client emergency, apparently." Talia's expression said everything her words didn't. "3rd time this month." "He's busy," Zoe defended weakly. "The investment firm is expanding and he's—" "Zoe." Talia crossed the room, perching on the desk. "We both know where he is." The truth hung between them. Dominic Reed, rising star at Blackwell Financial, boyfriend of 2 years, was likely entertaining another woman, probably someone he'd described to his colleagues as his side piece, a term he'd once laughingly confessed to using when Zoe found suspicious texts on his phone. "I heard him on the phone yesterday," Zoe admitted, "bragging to someone about how he has me wrapped around his finger while he plays the field." "And you're still with him because—" Zoe traced the edge of her sketchpad. "It's complicated." "It's really not," Talia countered gently. Their conversation was interrupted by Zoe's phone vibrating with an incoming call. Dominic again. With a resigned sigh, she answered. "Where are you?" His voice carried the familiar edge of irritation. "I've been trying to reach you." "At the studio." "Working. I thought you had a client emergency." "Wrapped up early. I'm at Vincenzo's. Come join." "Me? Not a request, a command." Zoe glanced at her watch. 10:30 p.m. "It's late, Dom. I have an early meeting tomorrow." "Don't be difficult, Zoe. I want to see you." The familiar pattern unfolded. His demand, her resistance, his escalation, her eventual capitulation. It was exhausting. "Fine," she said. "I'll be there in 20. At Vincenzo's, Dominic held court at the bar, his designer suit and practiced, charm creating an aura of importance. Zoe spotted lipstick on his collar before he noticed her. Crimson, not her shade. "There she is," he announced, pulling her into a possessive embrace. "Gentlemen, my girlfriend, the artist." The introduction was followed by his hand at the small of her back, guiding her movements. His colleagues nodded politely, their eyes assessing her worth in relation to Dominic's status. "Zoe creates those little drawings for websites," he explained, diminishing her work as he always did. "I'm an illustrator and brand designer," she corrected quietly. Dominic's grip tightened, imperceptibly. "Same thing, darling." The evening progressed predictably, Dominic dominating conversations, interrupting Zoe when she spoke, making subtle jokes at her expense that were just plausible enough to deny later. Later that night, as they argued in her apartment about the lipstick, his canceled dinner, and a dozen other grievances, Zoe caught her reflection in the mirror behind him. She barely recognized herself. The slumped shoulders, downcast eyes, the way she made herself smaller in his presence. "You're lucky to have me," Dominic was saying. "Do you know how many women would kill to be in your position?" For the first time, looking at her diminished reflection, Zoe wondered if any position with Dominic was worth having at all. Breaking free, the gallery walls were stark white, allowing Zoe's vibrant illustrations to command attention. Tonight marked the opening of Reclamation, a collaborative exhibition featuring her work alongside 2 other emerging artists. It was her first major showing, made possible by a grant she'd applied for secretly without telling Dominic. "These are extraordinary," whispered an elderly woman, her gaze fixed on Zoe's centerpiece, a triptych depicting a woman shedding layers of shadow to reveal light beneath. Such emotional honesty. Zoe smiled, warmth flooding her chest. Thank you. It had been 6 weeks since she'd ended things with Dominic. 6 weeks of alternating freedom and terror, of changing her locks and blocking his number, of ignoring the flowers and manipulative messages he'd sent to her workplace. He showed up at my apartment again, Zoe confided to Talia during a quiet moment. Demanded I stop being childish and come back. Talia handed her a glass of champagne. What did you do? Told him I'd call the police if he didn't leave. Zoe's hand trembled slightly. He laughed, said I'd regret throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. Narcissistic ass. Talia clinked her glass against Zoe's. To your freedom. The exhibition marked a turning point. That night, surrounded by people who valued her work, her authentic expression, Zoe felt something long dormant unfurling inside her. Self-worth, perhaps, or hope. The grant money allowed her to leave the design studio and establish her own small business. She rented a tiny storefront with living space above, converting it into a combination studio and gallery. Her days became her own, filled with client work she chose, personal projects that fed her soul, and slowly rebuilding friendships that had withered under Dominic's influence. She began volunteering at a community arts program, teaching illustration to teenagers. Their unfiltered enthusiasm reminded her why she'd fallen in love with art in the first place. Spring turned to summer. Occasionally, Zoe would hear about Dominic through mutual acquaintances. He'd been promoted, was dating someone, had mentioned to a colleague that his crazy ex still wasn't over him. Each time, the information affected her less. On a sweltering July afternoon, Zoe was sketching on the small balcony of her apartment when her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Is this Zoe Palmer? A woman's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Veronica Bennett from Horizon Foundation. We received your portfolio submission for our annual public art initiative. The committee was impressed with your work, particularly your reclamation series. Zoe's heart raced. The Horizon Foundation was prestigious, known for supporting artists whose work addressed social issues. We'd like to commission you for our upcoming exhibition on resilience. It includes a significant grant and culminates in a charity gala this fall. Would you be interested? Absolutely, Zoe managed, gripping the phone tightly. After the call, she sat in stunned silence. This opportunity, one she would have once thought beyond her reach, had come because she'd submitted her work herself, trusted her voice, believed in her vision. That evening, walking through the neighborhood park, Zoe noticed how different everything looked. The same trees, the same paths, but viewed through eyes no longer clouded by doubt. A text from Talia lit up her phone. Dinner to celebrate the Horizon news? Brought wine. Arriving home, Zoe found Talia waiting on her doorstep with takeout and a bottle of Prosecco. To new beginnings, Talia toasted once they were settled inside. Zoe raised her glass. And to never settling for shadows again. Later, as Talia helped clean up, she hesitated. I should warn you. Dominic's firm is one of the Horizon Foundation's major donors. He attends their events. Zoe paused, then nodded. I can handle seeing him. Are you sure? Looking around her space, filled with her work, her choices, her life, Zoe smiled. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Dominic can't take that from me. That night, she dreamed not of past hurts, but of blank canvases waiting to be filled, possibilities stretching endlessly before her. Unexpected encounter. The Horizon Foundation's studio space occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows framing the city skyline. For the past month, Zoe had been working there 3 days a week, developing her commissioned piece alongside 5 other selected artists. "Palmer, your section's looking fantastic," called Jasper, the project coordinator, as he passed her workstation. "The Foundation's executive director is stopping by today, wants to see progress." Zoe nodded, stepping back to assess her work, a large-scale multimedia installation exploring trauma and healing through layered imagery. She'd lost track of time, absorbed in the meticulous placement of elements, when a voice behind her spoke. "This is extraordinary." She turned to find a man studying her piece with genuine interest. Tall, with thoughtful eyes and an unassuming presence despite his impeccable suit, he seemed familiar, though she couldn't place him. "Thank you," she replied, wiping paint-stained fingers on her apron. "The way you've created depth here." He gestured toward the center panel. "It draws the viewer through the experience rather than merely observing it." His observation was perceptive, not the casual compliment of someone being polite. "That's exactly what I was aiming for," Zoe said, surprised. "The journey through darkness isn't linear," he smiled, extending his hand. "Harrison Bennett, I'm with the Foundation." The name clicked into place. Harrison Bennett, founder of Bennett Technologies and one of the city's most significant philanthropists. His company had revolutionized accessible technology for disabled communities, and his foundation supported arts and education initiatives throughout the region. "Zoe Palmer," she managed, shaking his hand. "But you probably knew that already." "I did." His smile was warm. "Your submission portfolio made quite an impression on our committee." Their conversation flowed easily as he asked thoughtful questions about her process and inspirations. Unlike Dominic, who had always dominated conversations, Harrison listened intently, engaged with her responses. "Would you mind showing me your preliminary sketches?" he asked. "I'm always fascinated by how artists develop their concepts." Zoe hesitated. Her sketchbooks contained personal explorations, vulnerable thoughts. Sensing her reluctance, Harrison immediately backtracked. "Only if you're comfortable sharing." The finished piece speaks eloquently enough. His respect for her boundaries was refreshing. Impulsively, she pulled out her process journal. "These are rough," she warned. "More emotional mapping than proper sketches." They spent nearly an hour reviewing her development process. Harrison never once checked his phone or showed signs of impatience, a stark contrast to Dominic's perpetual distraction. As he prepared to leave, Harrison paused. "There's a small gallery opening tomorrow evening, a photographer documenting climate displacement. Would you be interested in attending?" "Purely professional, of course." Zoe considered. After Dominic, she'd been wary of entanglements, especially with someone connected to her career. Reading her hesitation, Harrison added, "Several other Horizon artists will be there. The Foundation supports the photographer's work." "In that case, I'd like that," she decided. The gallery opening became coffee the following week, which led to conversations about books they both loved, which evolved into dinner at a quiet neighborhood restaurant where Harrison admitted he preferred the authentic food there to the pretentious establishments his colleagues favored. "Most people expect someone in my position to be different," he confessed over dessert. "How so? More interested in status? Less interested in substance?" His expression was thoughtful. "My wealth is incidental to who I am. It provides resources for work I care about, but it's not my identity." Something in his words resonated deeply with Zoe. For so long, Dominic had defined himself and tried to define her through external validation, possessions, appearances. As summer turned to fall, their connection deepened. Harrison never pushed, never presumed, never tried to impress her with his resources. Instead, he brought her obscure art books he thought she'd enjoy, remembered details she mentioned in passing, valued her opinions on matters both personal and professional. Gradually, Zoe found herself trusting again, not just Harrison, but her own judgment. Blossoming joy. The first snow of winter dusted the city as Zoe stood before her completed installation at the Horizon Foundation's gallery. In 3 days, the exhibition would open to the public, culminating in the charity gala that had once seemed so intimidating. Nervous? Harrison appeared beside her, 2 coffee cups in hand. Terrified, she admitted, accepting the drink gratefully, but in a good way. Their relationship had evolved naturally over the past months. Harrison had become her confidant, her supporter, her partner in the truest sense. They balanced each other, her creative intuition complementing his methodical thinking, his steadiness grounding her emotional intensity. "The foundation board is beyond impressed," he told her. "There's talk of extending the exhibition and taking it to other cities." Zoe leaned against him, momentarily overwhelmed. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life now." Harrison wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You created this reality, Zoe. Your talent, your courage, your resilience." Later that evening, in the comfort of Harrison's penthouse apartment, a space surprisingly homey and filled with books rather than status symbols, Zoe gathered her courage for a different conversation. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice wavering slightly. Harrison set aside his tablet, giving her his full attention, something she still wasn't entirely used to after years with Dominic. "I've suspected for a couple of weeks, but I confirmed it today." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words hung between them. They hadn't planned this, hadn't even discussed children in their 8 months together. Harrison's expression shifted from surprise to wonder. "We're having a baby?" "Yes." Zoe watched him carefully. "I know it's unexpected and complicated with the exhibition and—" "Zoe." He moved to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Nothing about this feels complicated to me. Unexpected. Yes. Wonderful, absolutely." Tears sprang to her eyes. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset about creating a family with the woman I love?" The simplicity of his response, the absolute certainty in his voice, broke something open inside her. The last lingering fear that happiness this complete might somehow be taken away. That weekend, Harrison took her to his family's cabin in the mountains. As they walked through snow-covered trails, he spoke of his childhood, his parents' loving marriage, his hopes for their future. At sunset, overlooking a frozen lake turned golden by the fading light, Harrison stopped walking. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he said, reaching into his pocket. "But I'm realizing there's no perfect moment, just perfect certainty." He revealed a simple emerald ring, her birthstone, not a diamond. "This was my grandmother's," he explained. "She was an artist too, a ceramicist who believed in creating beauty in everyday life." Harrison didn't kneel in the snow, didn't make a grand gesture. Instead, he held the ring between them, an offering rather than a claim. "I love you, Zoe. Your strength, your creativity, your heart. I would be honored to build a life with you, as your partner, as a parent to our child, as someone who gets to witness your journey." The proposal reflected everything she valued about him, thoughtfulness over spectacle, substance over show. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through tears. "Absolutely yes." They shared the news selectively, with Talia, who cried happy tears, with Harrison's sister, who immediately began planning a baby shower, with the Horizon Foundation director, who insisted Zoe's condition wouldn't affect her exhibition tour if she still wanted to participate. As the charity gala approached, Zoe's life felt surreal in its fullness. The darkness of her time with Dominic hadn't disappeared from memory, but it had transformed into something else, context that made her present joy all the more precious. The confrontation. The Horizon Foundation's annual gala transformed the industrial gallery space into an elegant wonderland. Crystal installations caught light from above, casting prismatic reflections across the room. Attendees in formal attire moved between exhibits, champagne flutes in hand, exclaiming over the artist's work. Zoe's installation had been positioned as a centerpiece, drawing continuous crowds. At Harrison's insistence, she wore a custom-designed emerald gown that complemented her ring and accommodated her subtle but growing baby bump. "Everyone's talking about your piece," Talia reported, appearing at her side in a borrowed designer dress. "I've overheard at least 3 collectors asking about acquiring your work." "It's surreal," Zoe admitted, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this, Ms. Palmer." Jasper approached, looking harried but pleased. "The foundation chairman would like to introduce you to some key donors. Would you mind?" Zoe squeezed Talia's hand and followed Jasper through the crowd. Harrison, tied up with foundation business, caught her eye from across the room and mouthed, "You're amazing," with a supportive smile. The chairman, an elegant woman in her 60s, was speaking with a small group near the bar. As Zoe approached, her step faltered. Standing among them, drink in hand and looking slightly bored, was Dominic. He hadn't noticed her yet. For a moment, Zoe considered retreating, finding Harrison, avoiding the confrontation altogether. Then she remembered her installation just feet away, her journey from darkness into light, from fear into strength. "Ah, here she is!" The chairman beckoned Zoe forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, Zoe Palmer, the artist behind Emergence. Zoe, these are some of our most generous supporters." She stepped forward, accepting the introduction with a gracious smile. When Dominic finally registered her presence, his expression cycled rapidly through surprise, confusion, and calculation. "Zoe?" he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "What are you doing here?" The chairman raised an eyebrow. "You know our featured artist, Mr. Reed?" "We're acquainted," Zoe replied evenly. Dominic recovered quickly, slipping into his charm offensive. "Zoe and I have history," he said, implying intimacy. "I always knew she had potential." The patronizing tone was familiar, but it no longer had power over her. "How interesting," the chairman remarked. "She's been an absolute revelation. Harrison speaks so highly of her vision." At the mention of Harrison, Dominic's expression soured slightly. "Harrison Bennett? You know him?" Before Zoe could respond, Harrison himself appeared at her side, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture of support, not possession. "Everything okay here?" he asked quietly. "Harrison," she smiled, leaning into him slightly. "This is Dominic Reed. We used to date." Understanding flickered in Harrison's eyes, but his expression remained pleasant. "Mr. Reed, nice to meet you. Your firm's support has been invaluable to the foundation." Dominic straightened, clearly trying to establish dominance in the exchange. "Bennett, didn't realize you were personally involved with the artists you fund." The implication was clear and ugly. Before Harrison could respond, Zoe stepped forward. "Harrison and I met after I was selected for the program," she stated calmly. "Not that it's relevant to my work." "Of course not," Dominic said with a smirk. "Though it explains how you suddenly landed such a prestigious opportunity." The chairman intervened smoothly. "Ms. Palmer's selection was unanimous among our independent jury. Her talent is extraordinary." Dominic's gaze traveled from Zoe's face to her emerald ring, then to the subtle curve of her pregnancy beneath her gown. Comprehension dawned, followed by something that looked almost like loss. "You're engaged? And pregnant?" His voice had lost its smooth edge. "Yes," Zoe confirmed simply. "We're expecting in spring," Harrison added, his voice warm with genuine joy. "We couldn't be happier." For a moment, Dominic seemed at a loss. The script he'd expected to follow disrupted beyond recovery. The woman he'd controlled and discarded was standing before him transformed. Successful, cherished, creating both art and life on her own terms. "Congratulations," he finally managed, the word hollow. The chairman, sensing tension, steered the conversation toward the Foundation's upcoming initiatives. Eventually, Dominic excused himself and disappeared into the crowd. Later, as Zoe and Harrison shared a quiet moment in a corner of the gallery, she spotted Dominic watching them from across the room, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" Harrison asked, following her gaze. Zoe considered the question carefully. Yes, she realized. Completely. "Do you want to leave?" She shook her head. "This is where I belong." As if to underscore her words, the Foundation director clinked a glass for attention and began a speech praising the exhibition. Zoe's name was mentioned first, her work described as transformative and the embodiment of the Foundation's mission. Applause filled the room. Harrison squeezed her hand. "Proud of you," he whispered. In that moment, surrounded by people who valued her work, standing beside a man who loved her authenticity, carrying a child created in genuine partnership, Zoe felt the final weight of her past lift away. She had not escaped Dominic simply to find Harrison. She had found herself, her strength, her voice, her worth. Everything else had followed from that essential reclamation. Across the room, Dominic slipped out a side door, alone. Zoe registered his departure not with satisfaction or vindication, but with a simple recognition. Some people choose shadows even when light is available to them. She chose light.